Won't know this just because I say it, but our regulars will know that you are what motivates me just about every Friday night to keep doing what I do. And I will say this because I say it often. Every time I say the Pledge of Allegiance to that flag, I remember those who serve and those who have fallen in favor. That is why tonight is as important a meeting as we've ever had. Tonight's going to be about these weapons of mass destruction. It's going to be about the foreign policies that our country has adopted and why so many of our brightest and best are being called on, and why they go so well, and how they come home, sometimes not so well. How many of you ever cleaned? I don't clean often. My wife does that, and she's good at it. But when I do, I usually make some kind of mistake. How many of you have ever mixed bleach and ammonia by mistake? It happens. And I got to tell you, when it happens, it's a chemical reaction. It's not biological, but it's a chemical reaction that you do not want to inhale. So these chemical and biological weapons that we are going to speak of tonight have a huge impact on the young men and women who went to serve. I'm going to start this off by reminding folks, if you don't know, in 1952, this is going to be a little bit about Iran, because the chemical weapons have and biologicals have a lot to do with Iran. I know we're talking about Iraq. Just bear with me while I give you a little background on why we thought we needed to use illegal, unlawful chemical weapons of mass destruction and biologicals, and why it was even us who sold them to Saddam Hussein. Now, in 1952, what happened in Iran after the BP, the British Oil Company, it wasn't BP then, had all of the oil wells in Iran nationalized. The CIA then, in reaction to that, had to fix it. They had to put a fix in for it. And long story short, because this is not a big part of this story, but what happened was our CIA installed the Shah of Iran. Now, the Shah was an iron-fisted dictator who kept the populace of Iran in line so that those oil profits could flow. And it was very important that the oil profits flowed. But the Islamic, at that time, I don't want to call them terrorists, but at that time they were caliphate-minded. They were an Islamic republic who did not like the Shah of Iran telling them what to do with their resources. Oh, by the way, I did want to do this also. I wanted to identify our Congressman Bentivolio here. Kerry, would you please stand up? Kerry Bentivolio wouldn't have been one of those kinds of people who sends our folks into harm's way without serious consideration. He wouldn't have done it in silence. And the reason that he wouldn't have been those kinds of legislatures is because he's been there 3 times. He knows what it is to go and hold the mantle of the United States and the people who sent him. Kerry knows that. Now back to the story of the setup that I have to give you on these weapons of mass destruction. Well, we had the Islamic Revolution because the Islamic folks in Iran didn't like the iron-fisted dictator, the Shah. Some of you remember the history. But they took our hostages. They threatened us. We were the great Satan to them. Whether or not the perception is true or not is not what I'm wanting to talk about. What I'm wanting to talk about is why we believed that we needed to arm Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction. That's the background of what I'm talking about here. See, because at that time, the CIA director was George Bush's daddy, and we were aligned with Saddam Hussein because Russia was aligned with Iran at that time. Now it's almost switched. It's almost, well, has flipped. But because of those hostages that they took and the threat that they had posed to the flow of oil and to our freedoms, we had to put together, well, one thing that came out of it too was the Iran-Contra affair. We're not going to go there. That was negative. But it was when we wanted to back Saddam Hussein in his war against Iran. The weapons of mass destruction that you're going to hear about tonight, that John Tomlinson was commissioned to destroy, that have destroyed a whole lot of John Tomlinson's. Those weapons of mass destruction that were sold to Saddam Hussein were done illegally, by the way, against the law of nations, against the UN. They were absolutely illegal to sell chemical biological weapons. But I say we, the CIA, put together a plan to allow Saddam Hussein the upper hand in the war against Ayatollah in Iran. Because they threatened not to sell oil in US dollars. And folks, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the consequence of that, but you have to realize that it is part and parcel to the reason that we will not face Saudi Arabia the way that our policies should. Because we have to walk on thin ice with them because of a petro bargain that Kissinger and Nixon put together. And so what we can't do is offend the people of Saudi Arabia with the truth. We have to continue to deceive. Even to this day, politicians will say, well, we never found the weapons of mass destruction. John, did we find them?
Yes, we did.
Okay, even to this day, I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat, I don't care if it's a president or a senator, to this, I don't care if it's one of ours, one of us, one that we sent up there and got elected, except for Kerry Bentivolio. Kerry wouldn't lie to us, and Kerry wouldn't lie, and that's why they didn't like him. But another story. Even to this day, they will say, we could not find those weapons of mass destruction, but we could find them. We did find them. And the problem is, folks, here's the problem. They had our name on them. Those weapons of mass destruction in a coalition with Britain, Russia, and the United States. John Tomlinson tonight, when he gives his piece, he will verify the fact that the United States, from the United States, was on most of those weapons of mass destruction. He's going to be talking about 40 warehouses, and I've read some accounts of over 50. John says from 35 to 40. I've read some accounts that said the size of Walmarts, folks, the size of Walmarts. And they were filled with chemical and biological weapons. And I don't know how much John's going to talk about tonight, but he was commissioned, or his group was commissioned, to set up blockades so that the people who lived among these 50 in Camisara, am I saying that right? In Camisara,
It was in out to Lime area.
Okay, you'll correct me on that. But this place where all of these 40 warehouses were, there were people who lived around those. And for their safety, our military have moved them out, but they wanted to go home. They wanted to go to what they knew their home was. So we had a blockade. We wouldn't let them go back. And you know, folks, this is the tragedy of this, and the travesty. Because of the history of who sold those weapons and where they come from, we did not recover and dismantle those weapons. And we could have done it because we've got smart people. We've got smart people in the military. We could have recovered it. We did not have to blow them up, other than for a reason. And what might that reason be? Because along with those weapons that John was commissioned to blow up, and God bless you, I salute you for following orders and representing us, it was not your doing. You honored us by doing your duty. But in doing so, what happened? Because John told me, I've just met John maybe a week and a half, but I've had some conversations. He told me at that blockade that they were holding back those families, men and women, young children who wanted to go home, wanted to go right back into those neighborhoods. Because you know what they do is put the weapons in the neighborhood. That's what they do. And that's what they did. Now, the reason we could have safely decommissioned them, brought them back, but we didn't do that, folks. And it is said, let me tell you what they say. I've heard them say it. It's like, give them another reason. And because we can't tell them what the real truth is, we can't handle the truth. They tell us that the reason is that we were getting ready to pull out, and we didn't want these weapons to fall back into the hands of Saddam Hussein. Well, really? Are we going to really believe that? Because we sold them to him to begin with. He was doing our bidding against Iran with them. He was also killing the Kurds. He was also a loose cannon. He was the Ba'ath Party, and that's the blood party. So we got in bed with the devil in order to accomplish a purpose, and the purpose was to support this debt dollar that we have. It's called the petrodollar bargain now. And we have to get a hold of this understanding about why our foreign policies aren't what they ought to be, and why we keep sending young men and women to a place of, if there was a hell on earth, that is where it would be. Because those folks have seen things that I would not want any of my children nor I to have to see. But God bless them because they were there in our name. I know this caucus will not send them in silence, and we will not receive them home in silence. I did a piece last night. I sent it out when Johnny comes marching home, and it just happened to coincide with John's name, Johnny. Hurrah, hurrah, when Johnny comes marching home. Is that all we really should do? No, we should hold government accountable as to why they were sent. We really should, because they all go honorably. And so the next time they go, this government that we put together needs to know that there are people like us out here that's going to hold you accountable, Mr. Government, Mr. and Mrs. Government. Hillary supported going into Iraq. Both sides of the aisle did. And it was because, here's the reason. It wasn't because he had weapons of mass destruction. We knew he had them, and we were okay with that. It's just got to be understood, folks. We were okay with him having those weapons. No, the real reason that we went in, and you can do your research on this. I'm pretty well satisfied that I know this is true. Is that Saddam Hussein, approximately a couple of months, I could be off a few weeks, before we invaded, dumped the US dollar and decided that he would sell his oil in euros. Now let me give you a little background. This has everything to do with John Tomlinson and what he was required to do in our name over there. A little background on that petrodollar bargain that Kissinger and Nixon signed in 1970. They went over there because Israel in the Six-Day War, they were really, kicking everybody's rear end. Saudi Arabia, their whites of their eyes was this big looking over into Israel. And so we had an opportunity because at that time we just decommissioned the Bretton Woods, which meant that dollar had to be backed by gold. So we decommissioned it. So what we had to do is have something to back the dollar, and it became oil. With this deal that we cut with Saudi Arabia, what we did was we went over there to King Faisal, I think I got his name wrong in one of my broadcasts, but it's King Faisal. And we said to him, listen, hey, a little bit like the Purple Gang down in Detroit. It's like this. We can give you protection against Israel, Kissinger said. But if you don't buy the protection, we can almost guarantee your oil fields are going to get blown up by Israel. But buy the protection. Now, they say, what's the protection? Well, it's easy. Here's the protection. If you will only sell your oil in US dollars, that's why it's called petrodollars. If you will only sell your oil in US dollars, we then will, your windows won't get broke. Your oil fields won't get blown. We'll protect you. We'll give you that protection. It was a good deal, and they liked it because they were really afraid. Because our military-industrial complex had armed Israel. Israel was a fighting machine because of our technology. And this is something we need to understand too, folks, about the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. It's not, I'm glad we got the best, but we better know how to harness it and use it, because there is no money in peace, folks. There is no money in peace. And if peace ever was to happen to break out, the military-industrial complex would find a way to fix that. So what the problem is here is our representatives, our legislatures, the people in Washington who will, and here's what I say, when lucre lobbies, liberty loses. So when these legislatures will take money from the military-industrial complex, listen, when those Scud missiles were raining over Israel from Saddam Hussein, and those chemicals were blown up in the air, you know what blew those chemicals up? The Patriot missile. You know where the Patriot missile was made? The motor components was made right here in Ann Arbor with Raytheon Corporation. The motors were made here. I don't know how many families depended on that income, how many retirements, how many, because see, we are well vested into the military-industrial complex for jobs. And it would hurt our economy if there was not war in the world. So there's a delicate balance that we have to understand when we send people to Washington to make policy decisions. I'm not anti-war, believe me. I go to the point of even being pro-war. But when it's declared responsibly but according to the Constitution, and then we should get it done and get out. Yep. The nation building thing is no good for this country, because what happens with nation building, when we build nations over there, we have to arm them. So the military-industrial complex wins every time that we have a mission. They say we want democracy in Egypt. No, we don't. We saw that democracy in Egypt didn't work out. Well, democracy in Iran didn't work out. That was the Iranian Revolution. Those people are Islamic. That's democracy. It's the people speak, and they spoke, we want a revolution. We don't want the Shah of Iran to be our dictator. And I've got to keep referring to this Iran thing and the weapons of mass destruction, but you know this deal that we just got with Iran that our president just made? How many folks realize that Corker, I forget his first name, Senator Corker, Mark Corker? Bob Corker, is he a senator or house? He's in the Senate. And he should know better. An international agreement by any name is a treaty. Case closed. Dictionary definition. John McCain says that it's not a treaty if the president calls it an agreement. Are you kidding me? What that did, the Corker Amendment, folks, listen to this. This is very important. This goes to the military-industrial complex. The Corker Amendment rendered the constitutional advice and consent clause in the Senate the same as Ted Cruz did with his fast-track authority, folks. And I don't care who it is, I'm going to call him out when you violate the Constitution. I don't know if Ted Cruz understood it or not. I don't know if Corker understood it or not. But what they did is took advice and consent from a 67-vote majority, supermajority, in the advice and consent of the Constitution for any treaty, and they rendered it down with these actions to 51 votes. Oh. Now, so now it only takes 51 votes. And what can happen if they don't get it approved, President Obama now can veto it and approve it anyway. And it would take then the 67 supermajority to override his veto, which they'll never get. What this means, the consequence of this, is that military-industrial complex now can sell in 5 years intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Say that one more time.
Intercontinental ballistic missiles. Mike, this is going on. Yeah.
Who can sell?
The military-industrial complex. Let me take the wireless. I don't know what's going on here. Testing 1, 2. The military, Mike, or Dan, turn this one up just a little bit. It's a little low. The military-industrial complex now with this treaty, so-called agreement, they can build intercontinental ballistic missiles. And what you have to understand, folks, is they're multinational, these companies. They may have their warehouses here, they may build them here, but they're multinational. They need the market. So Iran now can buy, and they can have the money to buy. I'm apologizing for this, it's going in and out loud. They can have the money to buy these intercontinental ballistic missiles from our military-industrial complex. Guess what that makes them able to reach? Us. An intercontinental ballistic missile from Iran can now reach the United States in 5 years. But our president says it's 5 years away. Iranian people are going to change their minds. They're going to get softer. Okay, now here's the problem. Listen to this. Who gets to give the antidote to the intercontinental ballistic missile? Raytheon, the Patriot missile, because when they are coming, we've got to send something out to intercept. Okay, now I'm working at Raytheon here in Ann Arbor, and I'm going to get a retirement from that corporation, that company. My family is fed. See the conflict we have? We are so well vested in the military-industrial complex, and the legislature in Washington is so on the take that the policies are often given that are not in the best interest of John Tomlinson, or his wife, or his family, or his mom and dad. What they're vested in is making money. I often say, we have seared our soul on the altar of commerce. And those, we being our people who can't afford to care, And I often say also that they have been to a ceremony called the casting of their care on the altar of the burning owl. Because, you know, Jesus said, cast your care upon me, for I careth for you. But these people who are making these kind of decisions, the decision that when those men and women and families were blockaded in Camisero, they couldn't get back to their homes. When the order came, folks, you listen to this. It's going to make you cry. I have cried about this. When the order came, the order to blow those up, to destroy the insignia where they came from, Isaiah, the order also came that you have to be 35, the military has to be 35 miles away.
25.
Well, 25. They went 25 and then you had to go further. But the gate was 8 miles.
We went 8 miles.
Yeah.
We had to go 16.
So they had to go further. They had to abandon the gate security for the folks. And understand this, those weren't all Muslims. There are Christian Arabs involved in this, folks. You don't have to get involved in saying, you know, who they were, but here's what happened. When the military, and this is the thing that John has the hardest thing, because I can see it in his eyes, because I know his heart. The thing that he has the hardest thing to deal with, not the weapons that the mass destruction, the chemicals that he breathed. I mean, that's hard. But the hardest thing that this man has to deal with is he had to follow those orders to vacate those blockades and go this way. And in vacating those blockades, those families went that way. And the order came to blow those weapons up. And guess who got blown up? You don't have to guess, you know. Children, women, and men got blown up. Why? Why did we have to pay that kind of price that this fella has to live with? And I'm trying to tell John, and John understands this. He did it in my name. And I will shoulder that responsibility. Because I sent him in silence, folks, as did a lot of people in this country. Because we're not holding government accountable for the sending. I'm not against the sending. But don't lie to me about why you're going in order to protect a family name. George Bush Jr., in order not to have his father go to jail, made a joke. What he said was, no, we couldn't find them weapons of mass destruction. He was on TV holding a press conference. He grabbed the curtain and he pulled it back and he looked back there and he went back there searching for the weapons of mass destruction. He made a joke out of it. I supported George W. Bush. I voted for him. I'm a conservative. He wasn't what I hoped he would be. He was who I feared he would be. But I didn't appreciate him making a joke out of that, because I know he knows that his father sold those weapons of mass destruction to Saddam Hussein, and I know he knew that they were there. So don't lie to me, Mr. President, and tell me that they didn't have them. Tell me the real reason we went in. Go ahead and tell me that it's because of the debt cycle in this country. We have $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. We can't even afford the funded liabilities. The unfunded liabilities here, folks, are things that we're not even being charged interest on. They take them, sort of like taking them off the books. I wish we could do that. But government can't. We have over $17 trillion deficit, almost 20, and the interest on that is, oh, let me tell you about the petrol bargain. And then John's going to get prepared to come, because I don't want to take so much time. We're going to try to get out of here at 11 o'clock tonight. Usually we're crazy enough to go to midnight. But because of this debt cycle, because of big nanny government, because of social spending, because that we care, and believe me, Republicans care too. We just care to make it different. We care to give them a fishing pole rather than the fish. That kind of story, you understand that? Because that we had such debt spending. The Vietnam War was a terrible amount of spending. And we fueled that with more spending. We left all those weapons over there, by the way. Everybody knows that served there. And we have some that served there that know, and I thank them. My salute is to them. But that petrol bargain deal, part of that, and here's what's important about this, folks. The thing that is most important is that when Kissinger made this deal with Saudi Arabia and the OPEC nations entered in and okayed it because they thought it was a great deal too, they were required by this agreement to do what? To purchase U.S. debt, our treasury bills. Our treasury bills have been funded by our enemies. That's the leverage they have. That's the big hammer they have on us. That's the reason our policies will walk softly and we will not carry the big stick. We got it, but we will not use it because we need them to fund the Federal Reserve that is continuing to print those debt dollars. And by the way, guess how much, I forget how much money, but guess how much the Federal Reserve used to bail out Greece? The Federal Reserve had a huge amount of money that you, the taxpayers, have had to. Now it's more debt, see, because it isn't there already. We're already in debt this year, and so we just print more, and now it's debt dollars that we have to find a purchaser for. So when Saddam Hussein dumped the dollar, he also said, hey, I'm not going to purchase your debt anymore either because I'm not making profits from the exchange of your currencies. See, everybody, like Germany, when they wanted to buy oil from any OPEC nation, what they had to do was exchange the mark for the US dollar. And see, that was a pretty cool deal for us. It remedied our problem. And that funded our irresponsible debt spending. And this is why, folks, that the weapons of mass destruction were not the issue. They were there because we tried to overthrow Ayatollah Khomeini. That was why they were there. The reason we went into Iraq, and folks, it's also true about the Afghanistan war, because Russia wanted to conduit their oil through Afghanistan, and believe me, they had discovered huge amounts of oil in the Caspian Sea basin that Russia wanted to get to China without using the US dollar. And if we, not us, but if our government allows that, then the dollar defaults, folks. And you need to consider what the consequences would be if the dollar did default. Locally every week we talk about a thing called the 10 circles of 10. 10 families creating a circle and 10 families creating a unit of 10, where there would be a market-based virtual co-op, things that free market-based, that the government doesn't control. Well, that's up for another time. But the severity is what I say, the dollar could default. And please try to understand the meaning of this when I say we mercenary our military and send them to do a job that we will not discuss, we will not talk about. When our legislatures are okay with them going, when Hillary agrees with sending them to Iraq, she has, and so did George W., mercenaried our military to accomplish a purpose that the Constitution never thought about. That the Founding Fathers never thought that we would put that on our serving men and women. So I thought often about this message that I was going to give tonight. I thought a lot about it. We've had some cancellations through some scheduling issues. About 4 weeks now we've been trying to get John in. And this message has been on my heart, and I haven't delivered it well enough. But I'm going to tell you that I make a promise that I will never send in silence young men and women to go to do something that our country is not willing to discuss. I will not receive them in silence either. Because when Johnny comes marching home, I'm going to make sure that when he carries his brother or his sister home because they couldn't march, that we understand that it had to be worth it. That it's not a national offense, it is a national defense, and it has to, not just for the betterment of our national policy, but for the security of our defense. Other than that, over there, my policy would be the last one standing gets to name the country. And if they are not willing to sacrifice their John Tomlinsons, which, you know, they're willing to kill them over an issue. The Sunni-Shia issue is a complicated one, but they're willing to kill each other. And if you're a Christian over there, when I say the last one standing gets to name the country, you're saying, man, Christians. But I got to tell you something. Christians got up and got out and formed this country. And you know who they were running from? I believe they were following God's will. I think some of them understood. But you know who? The remnants of the Ottoman Empire, folks, who was the Islamic mindset, they came from. And if it had not been for that big wide ocean that they traversed in a ship. And the fact that Islam was still on campus, they would have chased them here. But we became an empire that was built on Christian principles. You know how I know? The Mayflower Compact. The very first verbiage in that says, you're contracting to make this journey to this new world for the furtherance of Christianity. I don't want to hear from people who do not know that Christianity had a very consequential founding of this country. I do understand that a country is an animate object and it cannot receive Christ as its personal Savior. Therefore, it is a Christian country. But the people who sacrificed and founded this country are Christian. When I say the last one standing gets to name the country over there, rather than send our folks over there mercenarying our military, I am saying they too have to pay that price for their liberty that the history of our country has paid. Because it's just like, if you don't pay the price, you won't fight for it and you won't appreciate it as much. Our country has forgotten. Our country has, in fact, turned its back on God. And there's plenty of folks here probably that are secular, don't believe the way I believe in God. But you have to understand that this country has been blessed of God. You have to understand that. All you have to do is look. And you don't have to look very far. And my prayer is, and John, get prepared to come. John's going to give us a lot of things that are going to be inconvenient truths. Some of those things are going to verify what I've been saying about those weapons of mass destruction. And John's nervous, folks. He's not used to talking to people. And he's bringing this message to us. And by the way, we have, where's our donation? It's in back.